You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. Listen to this telephone conversation between Janice Biggins, who works for a house renting agency, and John Anderson. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example which has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello, Flagstone.
Oh, hello. Is that Flagstone Properties?
Yes, that's right. Flagstone here. How can I help you?
Hello. I'm ringing just to make inquiries about renting a house.
The name of the agent is Flagstone, so Flagstone has been written in the notes. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, Flagstone.
Oh, hello. Is that Flagstone Properties?
Yes, that's right. Flagstone here. How can I help you?
Hello. I'm ringing just to make inquiries about renting a house. My name's John Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Anderson. What sort of thing were you looking for?
2-bedroom house with garden.
Well, yes, sir, that shouldn't be any problem. Just to let you know that our main areas, the main areas we deal with are the city centre itself.
City centre,
And the north suburbs.
Oh, well, we were most interested in the northern areas, actually.
Right, yes. What sort of price were you thinking of?
Well, could you give me some idea?
Certainly. It really ranges from £250 per month.
Only £250?
Yes, to about £500, depending on a number of different factors.
Oh, what does it depend on?
Well, obviously the quality of the area, and then whether there's a garden.
Oh, well, as I said, we'd want a garden.
And a garage pushes up the price.
Right. Well, we wouldn't necessarily need one. I think about £350 a month would be our limit.
OK. Well, would you like to have a look at a couple of properties, sir?
Yes, that'd be great.
Looking at our files, I think we've got 2 which might suit you.
Oh, hang on. I'll just get a pen. Right.
OK, well, there's one on West Park Road, which is £325 a month.
Are the bills included?
Well, that one just includes the water bill.
OK, right.
And the second house is in Tithe Road. I'll just spell that for you, OK?
Yep.
Tithe Road.
Yeah, got that. And how much is that one?
That's £380.
380. Is that including water?
No, I'm afraid not, but it does include the telephone rental.
Oh, well, that's not too bad then. So...
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
So when would you be available to see them?
Well, I'll be in town next week, say Thursday.
No, I'm sorry, we don't have any availability for Thursday. How about Wednesday afternoon?
OK. That's fine. Would 5 be OK?
Yes, fine. 5 o'clock it is. Just come to the Flagstone offices.
Oh, before I forget, what sort of things do I need to get done, to rent with you?
Well, the most important thing is a letter from your bank.
No problem.
And then a reference letter from your employer.
Yes, that's OK.
Great. And then we would need you to give 2 weeks' notice of moving in.
Right, 2 weeks' notice. And what about a deposit?
That's 1 month's rent, whatever the amount is.
OK. 1 month. Is that it?
No, sorry, one more. You will have to pay for the contract.
Oh, yes, I'd forgotten about that. OK, fine. So I'll start arranging those, and
I'll see you next week.
Yes. Thanks very much. Bye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of section 1. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 2 on page 164. Section 2. You will hear a tour of a newly renovated health club. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15 on page 164. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 11 to 15.
Thank you all for coming to see the new renovations to the Hertford Health Club. I know you'll be as pleased as I am to see the wonderful results of our months of hard work to improve the club and bring you the best facilities ever. We'll begin in here with the swimming pool. You'll notice the new colour of the adult pool, a lovely cool green. Now walk over here and look at the children's pool. It's the same green, but as you see, with brightly coloured sea creatures painted everywhere. Both of the pools needed painting, not only for maintenance, but I think the new colour greatly improves the atmosphere of this part of the club. Next, let's take a look at the locker rooms. Don't worry, there's no one using them just now. Doesn't it feel roomy in here? We've expanded both the men's and women's locker rooms, so now they'll be much more comfortable to use. There are bigger lockers, a good deal more room in the dressing area, and more places to store extra towels and equipment. Be careful as you walk through here. The floor's just been polished and may be a bit slippery. Let's go up to the exercise room next. Here, you'll notice a new floor. Walk on it. Doesn't that feel comfortable? It's a special material, softer than the old floor, an ideal surface for jogging and exercising. They had to move all the exercise equipment out while they were working on the floor, but don't worry, it will be brought back in before the end of today. Let's step outside now and look at the tennis courts. We haven't done a great deal here except to the equipment. We replaced all the nets and the ball throwing machine. Otherwise, everything is the same as it was before. Let's walk down this hallway, and here we are at the club store in its new location. We thought here by the entrance was a better place for it than where it used to be by the swimming pool. But it still has all the same items for sale, sports equipment and clothes in the club colours.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20 on page 164. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
We're excited about the upcoming activities and events to take place in our newly renovated club. Now that the pools are ready for use again, swimming lessons will begin tomorrow for both adults and children. If you haven't signed up yet, you can stop by the office before you leave today and put your name on the list. If you're a tennis player, you'll be interested to hear about the tennis competition coming up on Wednesday. Players from different clubs all over the region will be participating. If you'd like to watch the event, tickets are available in the office. Also, I want to be sure you all know you're invited to our club party coming up next weekend. We're celebrating the completion of the renovation work, and we have a lot to celebrate. The entire renovation project was finished in just 9 months. That's 3 months less than the 12 months we'd originally planned on. We're proud of that, and proud that we came in under budget too. Because we've had such good results with this project, we're already planning the next one. We already have 2 indoor pools, and next year we plan to install an outdoor pool right next to the tennis courts. Details of these plans will be made available to all club members soon. All right, I think we've covered just about everything. Are there any questions?
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3 on page 55. Section 3. In this section, you will hear a discussion about a system of writing for the blind known as Braille. First, look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen to the first part of the discussion and complete the notes for questions 21 to 23.
We're very pleased to welcome to our special interest group today Dr. Linda Graycar, who is from the City Institute for the Blind. Linda is going to talk to us about the system of writing for the blind known as Braille. Linda, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, we'd like to keep this session pretty informal, and I know Linda won't mind if members of the group want to ask questions as we go along. Well, let's start with an obvious one. What is Braille, and where does it get its name from?
Well, as you said, Braille is a system of writing used by and for people who cannot see. It gets its name from the man who invented it, the Frenchman Louis Braille, who lived in the early 19th century.
Was Louis Braille actually blind himself?
Well, he wasn't born blind, but he lost his sight at the age of 3 as the result of an accident in his father's workshop. Louis Braille then went to Paris to the National Institute for Blind Children, and that's where he invented his writing system at the age of only 15 in 1824, while he was at the Institute.
But he wasn't the first person to invent a system of touch reading for the blind, was he?
No, another Frenchman had already come up with the idea of printing embossed letters that stood out from the paper, but this was very cumbersome and inefficient.
Did Louis Braille base his system on the first one?
No, not really. When he first went to Paris, he heard about a military system of writing using 12 dots. This was a system invented by an enterprising French army officer, and it was known as night writing. It wasn't meant for the blind, but rather for battle communications at night.
That must have been fun.
Look at questions 24 to 30. Listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
Anyway, Braille took this system as a starting point, but instead of using the 12 dots, which night writing used, he cut the number of dots in half and developed a 6-dot system.
Can you give us a little more information about how it works?
Well, it's a system of touch reading, which uses an arrangement of raised dots called a cell. Braille numbered the dot positions 1, 2, 3 downward on the left and 4, 5, 6 downward on the right. The letters of the alphabet are then formed by using different combinations of these dots.
Yes?
So, is the writing system based on the alphabet, with each word being individually spelt out?
Well, it's not quite that simple, I'm afraid. For instance, the first 10 letters of the alphabet are formed using dots 1, 2, 4 and 5. But Braille also has its own short forms for common words. For example, B for the word but and H for have. There are many other contractions like this.
So you spell out most words letter by letter, but you use short forms for common words?
Yes, though I think that makes it sound a little easier than it actually is.
And was it immediately accepted? I mean, did it catch on straight away?
Well, yes and no. It was immediately accepted and used by Braille's fellow students at the school, but the system was not officially adopted until 1854, 2 years after Braille's death. So official acceptance was slow in coming.
I suppose it works for all languages which use the Roman alphabet.
Yes, it does, with adaptations, of course.
Can it be written by hand, or do you need a machine to produce Braille?
Well, you can write it by hand onto paper with a device called a slate and stylus. But the trick is that you have to write backwards, from right to left, so that when you turn your sheet over, the dots face upwards and can be read like English from left to right.
Oh, I see.
But these days, you'd probably use a Braille writing machine, which is a lot easier.
And tell us, Linda, is Braille used in other ways, other than for reading text?
Yes, indeed. In addition to the literary Braille code, as it's known, which of course includes English and French, there are other codes. For instance, in 1965, they created a form of Braille for mathematics.
I can't imagine trying to do maths in Braille.
Yes, that does sound difficult, I agree. And there's also a version for scientific notation. Oh, and yes, I almost forgot. There is now a version for music notation as well.
Well, thanks, Linda. That was most interesting. Now, does anyone have any last questions? Yes.
Roughly how long does it take to learn to read Braille? Can you do it in a...
On page 35. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about dust storms. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
In the last lecture, we looked at the adverse effects of desert dust on global climate. Today, we're going to examine more closely what causes dust storms and what other effects they can have. As you know, dust storms have always been a feature of desert climates, but what we want to focus on today is the extent to which human activity is causing them. And it's this trend that I want to look at, because it has wide-ranging implications. So, what are these human activities? Well, there are two main types that affect the wind erosion process, and thus the frequency of dust storms. There are activities that break up naturally wind-resistant surfaces, such as off-road vehicle use and construction. And there are those that remove protective vegetation cover from soils, for example, mainly farming and drainage. In many cases, the two effects occur simultaneously, which adds to the problem. Let's look at some real examples and see what I'm talking about. Perhaps the best-known example of agricultural impact on desert dust is the creation of the USA's Dust Bowl in the 1930s. The dramatic rise in the number of dust storms during the latter part of that decade was the result of farmers mismanaging their land. In fact, choking dust storms became so commonplace that the decade became known as the Dirty 30s. Researchers observed a similar but more prolonged increase in dustiness in West Africa between the 1960s and the 1980s, when the frequency of the storms rose to 80 a year, and the dust was so thick that visibility was reduced to 1,000 meters. This was a hazard to pilots and road users. In places like Arizona, the most dangerous dust clouds are those generated by dry thunderstorms. Here, this type of storm is so common that the problem inspired officials to develop an alert system to warn people of oncoming thunderstorms. When this dust is deposited, it causes all sorts of problems for machine operators. It can penetrate the smallest nooks and crannies and play havoc with the way things operate, because most of the dust is made up of quartz, which is very hard. Another example. The concentration of dust originating from the Sahara has risen steadily since the mid-1960s. This increase in wind erosion has coincided with a prolonged drought, which has gripped the Sahara's southern fringe. Drought is commonly associated with an increase in dust-raising activity, but it's actually caused by low rainfall, which results in vegetation dying off.
In the second part, the speaker talks about the drying up of the Aral Sea. Look at questions 37 to 40 and complete the flowchart.
One of the foremost examples of modern human-induced environmental degradation is the drying up of the Aral Sea in Central Asia. Its ecological demise dates from the 1950s, when intensive irrigation began in the then Central Asian republics of the USSR. This produced a dramatic decline in the volume of water entering the sea from its two major tributaries. In 1960, the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake in the world, but since that time it has lost 2/3 of its volume. Its surface area has halved, and its water level has dropped by more than 216 meters. A knock-on effect of this ecological disaster has been the release of significant new sources of wind-blown material as the water level has dropped. And the problems don't stop there. The salinity of the lake has increased so that it is now virtually the same as seawater. This means that the material that is blown from the dry bed of the Aral Sea is highly saline. Scientists believe it is adversely affecting crops around the sea because salts are toxic to plants. This shows that dust storms have numerous consequences beyond their effects on climate, both for the workings of environmental systems and for people living in drylands.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.